Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Gabe Teran, a resident in the city of Oxnard, and I'm going to talk to you real briefly about an item that's on tonight's agenda that I'm just now getting around to just because I've been really busy with work and some other things. So I just wanted to go over it. I'm actually going to go speak on it later tonight because I really had some questions about one of them, but it's the Oxnard Government Accountability and Ethics Act. And there's a number of components, there's 6 components to it that I think that people might be interested in hearing about. And so it was very interesting to me, so I thought I'd talk about it real quickly. And I have to be really quick because I think my family's going to come home from swimming practice in a few minutes here, and so they might interrupt us. So apologies ahead of time if that happens. So getting into it, there's 6 items, as I had mentioned. I'm going to go through them kind of out of order just because there's one that I want to save for last I want to talk about a little bit more in detail. So first one is if this ordinance moves forward, it will go to the ballot to ask voters in March, not in November of 2020, but March of 2020, should we enact these items in the city of Oxnard. So all the ones I'm going to go over, again, they'll be on the March 3rd primary election. Remember, California is now having their primary election in March, where it used to be June. So that's when this is being proposed to happen, and it's going before City Council tonight to say, should we put this on the ballot for the voters in March? All right, so here we go. First one, prohibition on acceptance of gifts. So no City Council member and nobody on the Planning Commission should be receiving any gifts from anyone for anything that's going to maybe influence their decision on any kind of legislative action, or they certainly shouldn't be getting anything from like developers or anyone where there might be a conflict of interest. That kind of goes without saying. No person should make any elected or no official should be accepting any gifts either. So it's not just don't accept gifts, and they're telling people, hey, don't give them gifts. And there is also like kind of the distinction there, like unless it's through the usual process of like business. So it's not like they can't go to Taco Tuesday at Del Taco and not be able to take advantage of a special, because that's available to everybody. It's not a special thing Del Taco is doing just for them on Tuesdays. So that's the difference there. And then there's a bunch of definitions of what a gift actually is and what it is not. And that's, it's all pretty straightforward. I think that one is going to keep them from getting in trouble where previous council members, not just from Oxnard, but in other areas as well, have gotten into trouble for accepting gifts that maybe they didn't think were gifts. So anyways, giving people the benefit of the doubt on that one in the past. However, now it's going to be clear cut. There should be no accepting of gifts by city council members, by the mayor, or by anyone on the planning commission. All right, next one is pretty straightforward. Posting of monthly financial statements on the city website. So it says, to help ensure transparency, the city shall timely post on its website monthly financial reporting, including budget to actual results for revenues, expenditures, etc., etc. So people should be able to follow along monthly. If people vote this in, should be able to follow along monthly every single month of financial statement by the city on the city's website, easily accessible, that says this is how much the city brought in, this is how much they're putting out in expenditures. The next one is transparency in public contracts and financial reporting. So the financial reporting part is part of what I just discussed, but the transparency in contracts is all agreements requiring city council approval must be posted on the city's website for review by the public. The only exception to that is unless it's determined by the city attorney that it doesn't need to be published. And I'm guessing there would be very rare instances where that would come up. Maybe it's like if there's contract negotiations or real estate negotiations or something like that. That would remain confidential until it becomes public. But otherwise, all contracts would be available to the public prior to city council action on those contracts. The second component to that one, though, is all labor agreements, and all agreements greater than $200,000 must be posted on the city's website and made public at least 10 days prior to the city council action on it. And only the city council can make an exception to that, and it has to be by a 2/3 vote. So That's a transparency, just all the agreements that are coming down, those have to be posted for review on the city's website. And I'm assuming that there will be paper copies for anyone who doesn't use the internet or prefers to have a hard copy, and those will likely be available at the city clerk's office or at City Hall. All right, so the next one here is election of members by council district, which we already have. That's just ratifying it to make it solid. And then election of the mayor at large and the length of terms in office. So we're going to stay in council districts. If that was a big thing with the last election, it was the first time we have 6 districts, remember, in our city. Each city council member represents that district, but they also have a resolution saying they represent the entire city still, so that there's nobody saying, like, that's not my problem, it's not in my district, let somebody from X district deal with it because it's not my problem. Nobody's supposed to be doing that. However, the mayor is still elected at large, meaning everybody in the city elects the mayor, where with your district, you only can, on the ballot, you will only see who's running for your district, but the mayor will be on everybody's ballot. And they're also extending the term from 2 to 4 years, and that's something that is currently being circulated for signature as well, which would extend the mayor's term to 4 years, which I think that's great. Every 2 years is brutal. I mean, always having to be kind of in that campaigning mode, and it sounds like it's a lot of time, but in city politics 2 years is really quick. Like, it goes by really fast. So that's just something I think is great that they're doing that, but know that that's going to be part of the ballot initiative that's going forward tonight. Then there's term limits. This is also another thing that's being circulated for signature in a completely different ballot initiative. This one's being put forward by the city, and I'll tell you the difference. The one that's being circulated for signatures right now, the term limits are 2 terms, meaning that if a person is elected and they do a good job for the first term, they can run again and get elected for a second term. After that second term of 4 years, that's it. They're done. No more. They have to take like a 2-year break, and then they can run again in the future. However, this one being proposed by the city is 3 terms, 3 4-year terms, meaning that they get elected once. If they do a good job, they can maybe get elected again. If they do another good job, then they can hopefully get elected again. But after that 3rd term, that's it. So again, it says here they have to take a 2-year break after they term out, and then they can run again for that seat or any council seat after that 2-year break. So here's the thing. Think about if you ever had a job with a position that is constantly having somebody get hired and retrained for it. Either they get a lot of experience and they move on and get a promotion or get a better job, or it's just maybe that it's not very well managed and people are constantly cycling in and out of that position. So think about when somebody is, or a position is constantly having new people in, you're constantly having to retrain, there's that learning curve, there's a lot of resources put onto new people. So in city councils or in elected positions with a 4-year term, think about it. You get elected for your first term, and unless you've had some kind of previous government elected body experience before, you need to learn the ropes. You learn about how the city works, about all the processes, who all the players are in the city staff. You have to have all this learning curve. You go and learn about the Brown Act. You learn about Robert's rules. You learn about all of the city functions and everything. There's a whole lot that goes in that first term. And people kind of like, during that first term, it's a big learning curve. And I'll tell you, the whole first 4 years is learning how to do that job. So let's say they get a really good hang of it, and they're a really great elected person, and they get reelected to a second term. That second term, now that they have the first term under their belt, that's when they can really shine and do a lot of great work. They know how the system works. They know who's who. They know how to make things happen. They can be really effective in that second term. However, now in a 2-term limit, they get the ropes, they get it, they do a great job, but now they're done. And now you're having to cycle a new person in who's going to have that learning curve and everything for the first 4 years. And maybe they do a great job, and maybe they get elected again, and then they're done again. Where with 3 terms, you can get 2 really good terms out of somebody who's really good, who's a really good elected official, who does a really good job at their role and is really great with constituents. And I think that's great to get 8 years out of somebody who's doing really great for the constituents and for whatever body they're elected to act on. If they're not great in any one of those terms, it's our job as voters to tell them, hey, you know what, we weren't happy with your performance. See you later. So If they are doing a great job, though, 2 terms just is too quick for that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That's my opinion. But I think you can find that at local government levels, there's a reason why there's not a lot of places that have term limits. And when it comes up, it's usually because it was initiated by someone in the city or by the city itself. The city of Camarillo, for example, I think they had somebody on their council who was there for close to like 30 years. It's a long time to be on council, and hey, maybe they did a great job. I don't know a lot about Camarillo city politics. I just know they get a lot of tax revenue from those outlets. But that is a long time. And so maybe that's where term limits do come in, and you can cycle new people in. But look, you can't be constantly cycling new people in, because we're going to be floundering and having people constantly learning how to do their job, do good for a little while, and then they're done. So I think 3 terms is a little bit more reasonable than 2. All right, last one is campaign finance reforms. And this is a big one because in a city like Oxnard, we actually have no limits on campaign spending or campaign limits or fundraising. And it's all kind of the basic stuff that falls under the fair political practices. And so we kind of like defer to that. However, this is now looking to make it a little bit more, to rein in that spending and that fundraising a little bit. And so, for example, for city council members, the maximum amount a single person can donate to a campaign is $500. Any one person, maximum is $500 for a campaign. Maximum from a political committee is $1,000. So if you have this political action committee or these small PACs in the city who want to get money towards a certain candidate, the maximum amount they can put in is $1,000 for that campaign. For the mayor, it is $750 for an individual, and it's $1,500 for a committee. Loans, the maximum amount of a loan that can be given to a campaign, I don't know why I spaced out on that, $500 for a loan. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Anonymous contributions, anonymous, secret, dark people who don't want to come out of the shadows to donate to your campaign. I'm just kidding. If you're one of those people, hey, you're great. Well, now if you're one of those people, under this, you can only donate $100 per anonymous donation instance. And there's some other things there too, adjusting for the cost of living, which I've seen other cities who've done campaign finance reform have added onto there. Commercial loans are okay. You can get a loan from a bank to be able to fund a campaign. Campaign disclosures there, the city clerk's overseeing all of this. But here's the thing. So we have the limits on the amount a person can donate. But one thing that isn't on there is the maximum amount that a campaign can spend. And that is referred to, let me look at my notes here, that's referred to as a voluntary expenditure ceiling. The city of Ventura has one, the city of Santa Barbara has one, the county of Ventura for the county supervisors has one. And that, to me, is really the way that you can look at leveling the playing field. If you have these really great candidates who maybe don't have the resources or the connections to raise money as some of the more well-connected people or those with deep pockets might do, well, there's already a disadvantage there, right? So I'm going to use some information here that I did in some very quick research, and it's just ballpark numbers here, but you can access this on the city's website. I forgot to say the campaign spending limit or the ceiling, the voluntary expenditure ceiling for Ventura is $34,000 for a campaign. You can't spend any more than $34,000 on your campaign. Santa Barbara is $50,000, right? So 2 cities, with a good size population, and that's the range that they're looking at for campaign expenditure ceiling. So for the mayor's race from 2018, we had Tim Flynn brought in $22,000. Again, I looked at these real quickly. This is just what I could pick up. It's probably a margin of error of a few $1,000s here. And he spent $32,000 on his campaign, or his campaign spent the money. He didn't personally spend that money. It was his campaign raised $22,000. They spent $32,000, and they took a loan to make up the difference from what I could see. Mr. Quintana, Mario Quintana, I couldn't find a financial report for him, so I'm sorry I don't have the information. For Aaron Starr, who also ran for mayor in that election, he was able to raise $73,000. Oh, excuse me, $81,000. $73,000 of which was a loan from himself, according to the records, and his campaign spent $45,000. So you can see the expenditure limit. If it's $34,000 in Ventura, I mean, Tim Flynn came really close to spending that, and Mr. Starr spent $45,000 in his campaign for the city of Oxnard. Now, to put that into context, Mr. Starr's Mr. Starr's campaign spent $17,000 just to an ad firm for his campaigning. And I'm not endorsing, or I'm not saying I support or don't support either of those candidates. I just wanted to give you an example of what spending looked like in the most recent election. So $32,000 and $45,000 in campaign expenditures for the mayor's race for a 2-year position. Hopefully that changes, because again, like I said, that's brutal. But let's say that we had somebody who was new to politics, had some really great ideas, had some really great experience, and was a great candidate. Well, when you look at some of the other candidates who ran in that race, like for the councils, some of them raised like $2,000, $3,000. I mean, how are you going to compete with somebody who can get tens of thousands of dollars, or give themselves a loan of $10,000, or even a loan of $73,000? Again, not to single out any candidate, I'm just giving examples with the numbers we have available through public records. So, all that being said, I want you to think about that. Think about the great Dorina Padilla, who is really has a great story. I think she won with like $600 out of her own pocket. And I know there were other factors that went into that, and how the top candidate actually ended up not getting the votes, and she was able to squeak by and get elected, which is a great story. But her $600 versus somebody who was very well funded, that's a true underdog story, but it's also not very common. If you have more money, you have more ability and accessibility to exposure. Like I said, for example, Mr. Starr spent $17,000 just on an ad firm for his campaign. And if you remember back on Instagram and Facebook and the flyers he would send home through the mailers are crazy expensive. So there's a lot of money put into this. And I think that in order to truly make it a level playing field, and I'm going to share this with the council tonight, I'm hoping city staff will consider a voluntary expenditure ceiling. Usually the way those work is it's called voluntary. You can say, all right, I agree to only spend $35,000 or whatever it is on my campaign. And for that, my contributions will be X amount. Let's say it's $500 and $1,000, like you spelled out earlier. But because it's voluntary, you can also say, no, I would rather not have the voluntary expenditure ceiling. Instead, I would like to spend as much as I'd like in expenditures in my campaign, and that's allowed. But what other places have done is, if you don't agree to it, then you have a lower contribution limit. So instead of $500 per individual, maybe it's $200 per individual. And instead of $1,000 from a committee, maybe it's only like $500 from a committee. So you can see how it'd be a little bit more difficult. You have to get more people involved to raise the amount of money in order to have that same amount of funding. Whereas if you agree to the expenditure ceiling, that levels the playing field for people who want to throw their hat in the ring. So anyways, that's kind of my input on all those things. It's going to come up tonight. It's like one of the last things on the agenda. So, I'll be going back to that. Just so you all know, for the record, from what I could see, the cities of Ventura, Thousand Oaks, Fillmore, Simi Valley, and the county for county supervisors all have campaign spending limits ordinances. The last thing I'll say, all these things are going to go to the voters, because as I learned, if it goes to the voters and it's not an ordinance, it's voted on as an initiative, it can only be changed by the voters. It can't be changed by future city councils. It can't be changed by city staff in the future. It has to go back to the voters for any changes. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed that. And if you have any questions, put them down in the comments. I'll point down, because I'm sure that's where the comments will be. And I think my family's back, so perfect timing. Anyways, hope you all have a good night, and I'll see you later.